I still can't believe this happened, but guess what? It did. Iron Man beat Magneto, and seemingly handily so as well. Although I would like to add in here that I think he, to a certain extent, got lucky. Magneto and Iron Man faced off during Avengers vs. X-Men. As the Phoenix Force was headed towards Earth, Iron Man squared off with Magneto, who attempted to argue that Iron Man was falling on the wrong side of history here, persecuting mutants just as Magneto had so long ago been persecuted years ago in Germany. However, Iron Man wasn't hearing this kind of logic and turned his back on Magneto, saying that he and the X-Men were the ones threatening all of humanity with their willingness to welcome the returning Phoenix Force. If you're wondering why I'm considering Magneto a hero, by the way, on this list, that is because he was a hero at this time. He has been sometimes he's a villain, sometimes he's a hero, and this time around he was actually working alongside the X-Men. Iron Man managed to arm himself with a non-metallic suit and pull off a few metallic tricks of his own to get in a few good hits to boot. But at the end of the day, Magneto was distracted by the Phoenix Force, which he sent snuffing out an entire planet on its way to Earth. And this made him give up the fight and kind of question even what side he was on, instead hoping that Iron Man would find the Scarlet Witch, whose help Magneto believed Tony would actually need. So really, the fight wasn't necessarily Tony fully winning, it was kind of like Magneto deciding, maybe I shouldn't be in this fight. Iron Man made short work of humbling Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. Reed is known as the team's leader, Mr. Fantastic, who is known not just for his stretching powers, but more often for his brilliant intellect, being considered one of the most brilliant minds in the Marvel Universe. When Iron Man becomes a god, he makes everyone as smart as he is normally, which for Reed is actually considered a downgrade since he was actually smarter than Tony. This means that in trying to give him a gift, Stark actually lowered Reed's IQ instead of increasing it. Unintentional humble. Tony at least tried to humble the X-Men this time around by comparing lots with them. Not a great move on his part honestly, but hey, he tried at least. This all went down during the first Civil War when he had a chat with Emma Frost, one of his ex-flames. He attempted to compare the Avengers to the X-Men, saying that they also had to deal with a lot of prejudice too. However, while he did attempt to humble Emma into backing down, this actually ended up ultimately backfiring on him as Emma decided to turn up the heat just a notch, causing her to remind him of just how much hate and prejudice mutants had to deal with, including the catastrophic events that happened on Genosha. The Avengers have never had to deal with something on that scale, it's true, so obviously while this was an attempt at a humble, it wasn't completely successful, let's just say. Well, Tony and James Rhodes are actually known to be fast and best friends in the comics. They don't always see eye to eye, like when Jim took Iron Man's place for a time and went on to serve as the hero War Machine. The two did not agree in terms of their approach to heroics, and this resulted in tension building between them, which ultimately culminated in a full-on fight. While Rhodes had some pretty scathing criticisms that he threw at Iron Man during the fight, Tony at one point seemed to have the upper hand during the physical altercation, which spanned across both of their series. Fortunately, both of them were spared from doing something boldly permanent to the other that they might regret by Bethany Cave, an ally and love interest of Tony's, who set off an EMP to shut down their suits, systems, and temporarily stop the fight between them. Iron Man majorly humbled the Hulk when he managed to be a part of the group that would send Hulk off-world. This secret superhero group was known as the Illuminati. The Illuminati was a group of superhero geniuses who believed that they best knew how to run the world and decided to operate in secret behind the scenes, making major plays to orchestrate just that. Thinking they were, big know-it-alls, unsurprisingly, many of their plays actually ended up being pretty bad ones that had catastrophic consequences. Case in point, when they decided to send Hulk off-world in order to protect Earth from him. This would end up coming back to bite them in the butt when Hulk returned to Earth, and of course, World War Hulk happened. Axis was a wild time for a lot of heroes out there, but especially, I would say, for Iron Man. During the Axis event, many heroes and villains had their alignments reversed, and Tony even managed to escape his alignment being flipped once more back to normal, from bad back to good, so he would stay bad even after the event. Tony would turn Extremis into a program, like an app, which allowed users to change their physicality at will. At first the app was free, but after getting everyone hooked on it, Stark made it insanely expensive. This prompted Daredevil to confront Stark at his home, explaining that many of the users who could not afford the exorbitant costs were instead turning to a life of crime to help them foot the bill. Iron Man, or Superior Iron Man as he was known at the time, didn't want to hear this though, and so made short work of Matt, kicking Dee Dee out of his home by tossing tossing Matt literally off his balcony. In the MCU, Tony Stark has some pretty big beef with Bucky Barnes, Captain America's former sidekick turned brainwashed assassin super soldier known as the Winter Soldier. Both in the comics and the cinematic universe, it was Bucky Barnes who was behind the assassination of Iron Man's parents, and this is a large part of what drives a wedge between Captain America and Iron Man in the MCU. Although, let's be honest, tensions have always run somewhat high between these two, from even way back in the good old comics days. While Cap seeks to find redemption for Bucky and free him from his programming, Tony is out for revenge, and when he ends up going toe-to-toe with Bucky and his back is up against the wall, literally, he decides to not hold back and ends up blowing off Bucky's arm. His metal arm though, of course, his prosthetic at least, his other arm is okay, and of course, at least this would all be resolved with Bucky becoming a hero and even getting a new arm gifted to him by Black Panther and Wakanda, so in the end it all worked out, but man, what a moment. When Iron Man wants to be, he can be quite savage. Case in point, how he dealt with Spider-Man in the 2005 Iron Man series during Civil War. In issue number 14, Tony at one point faces off with Spider-Man and uses his suit to analyze Peter's Spidey sense. Based on that analysis, he is not only able to make his own version of Spider-Sense, but is also able to neutralize and even mess with Spider-Man's. Iron Man then can use this against Spider-Man to misguide him, distracting him with a false warning before easily taking him out. Some of these moments are actually more embarrassing, I feel, for Tony, but I digress. For this one, we're looking to the pages of Civil War II. I know, I'm sorry to take you back to Civil War II, but here we go, here we are, this is what's happening. Here, Tony manages to kidnap the Inhuman precog Ulysses, who is at the center of the Second Civil War, for those that aren't aware of that. Ulysses was basically what the Second Civil War was all about. He could see the future. On Captain Marvel's side, she was like, I think we should persecute people before they've done anything wrong, and on Iron Man's side, he was like, no, we should wait till people actually do bad things before we punish them. Seems reasonable. Iron Man gets into Attilan quiet and stealthily and manages to also quickly get out with Ulysses in tow, all pretty much under the Inhumans' noses, leaving behind a decoy to distract them. By the time they're on to Tony, his plan is already in motion and it's seemingly much too late. He swaps out with the decoy, which explodes in his place, with Iron Man then getting to safety with Ulysses in tow, honestly making all of the Inhumans look pretty embarrassed. Pretty humbled, I'd say. All of the Inhumans. Although, let's talk about someone specifically for our final point here. Honestly, one of the Inhumans that Iron Man makes look the most ridiculous is Karnak. Just this writing, honestly, I feel like makes Karnak look really ridiculous. Poor Karnak. I feel bad for him, actually. I really like him and I think he's a super cool character, and I feel like this fight does not do him justice. His ability is that he can find anyone's weakness. The problem when it comes to fighting Tony, well, Tony claims he just doesn't have any weaknesses. Oh, so ridiculous. Iron Man declares this before blasting and handily defeating Karnak in basically like a couple short panels, but I'm gonna just chalk this one up to the fact that at the time Iron Man was obviously, not within the suit. That was a decoy, so when he says he doesn't have any weaknesses, he might more be referring to the misdirect in regards to the fact that, he isn't actually there at the time. So how can you have weaknesses if you're not present? I guess. Maybe. Maybe that's how that works. Either way, I don't believe that Tony Stark actually has zero weaknesses, but that's what he declared here and it seemed to work out for him, so there you go.
Number 10. The Hulk. Now we're starting off this list with a big one. I could have easily chosen all of my spots from when Deadpool killed the Marvel Universe, but while Deadpool has defeated the Hulk and many others, that's not actually canon. But luckily, we do have a canon example of when Deadpool defeated the Hulk. This took place in the 1997 volume of Deadpool in issue number 4, when Deadpool needed to challenge the Hulk to get some of his blood in order to counteract the gamma radiation that was affecting Deadpool. The Hulk at this time was making Duck Key his own little paradise, and Deadpool, scared out of his wits, went in this fight just trying to ask for some of the green stuff coursing through the Hulk's veins. Unsurprisingly, the Hulk was not about it. After trying his darndest to get what he wanted, the Hulk was just a bit too much for Wade to handle, so he came up with a cunning plan. As the Hulk jumped up into the air, probably planning to squash Wade when he came back down, Deadpool positioned a broken post on the ground just so perfectly that the Hulk wound up impaling himself right on it when he landed. Now normally this isn't supposed to be possible, and Deadpool makes note of that fact, but apparently the Hulk was a little sick at this point in time, and Wade gets what he wants and gets the heck out of Dodge while he still has the chance. Number 9. Black Panther. So basically what happens here in Black Panther vs. Deadpool number 4 is that Mr. Poole heads to Wakanda to steal a bit of vibranium to help heal a mailman. Yes, that is the actual reason. Okay, so Black Panther manages to de-head the Merc and then put him back together, restraining him and going through his stuff, particularly his utility belt pouches, in a Wakandan lab. Now, as these two are having a very entertaining back and forth, Deadpool reveals that he has pulled a fast one on T'Challa, as he has some C4 in one of those pouches on a timer that is about to go off. Which it does, since there are way too many pouches for T'Challa to find it in time, which is hilarious. Wade actually ends up grabbing a red ceremonial Wakandan necklace and putting it on. Now, this was actually a prototype Panther habit. The suit analyzes his DNA, and since Black Panther has everybody's DNA on file, it bestows itself onto Deadpool. It remakes itself on Deadpool, adapting to his usual color scheme and the weapons that he likes to use, christening himself Pantherpool, or Dead Panther. No, Pantherpool. Pantherpool's better. It also pretty much brings him up to par with the true Black Panther, which is proven when the two get into a bit of fisticuffs, until Wade's pocket-sized teleporter activates and he teleports to the Great Mound, aka the Vibranium Mine of Wakanda, which he then accidentally teleports to right outside New Jersey, the whole mountain. Number 8, Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine first met in 1994's Wolverine number 88. Now, while Wolverine may be stronger, Deadpool's speed, healing factor, his skill in combat, and his absolutely buck-wild behavior has allowed him to get the drop on Wolverine and do a lot of damage many different times. In their first ever encounter, the Merc with a Mouth ambushes Wolverine while he's checking up on Garrison Kane, who's another Weapon X experiment. Now, during the ensuing fight, Deadpool earned his reputation as one of Marvel Comics' most brutal mutants by stabbing his two swords into Wolverine's heart and lungs. Now, while this typically wouldn't phase the healing mutant, Wolverine had recently lost his healing factor during a bout with Magneto. Now, thankfully for Wolverine, his healing factor had begun to slowly return in the days leading up to this fight with Deadpool, allowing him to survive the wounds he'd suffered and win a rematch later on, but he even needed help to do that. It was brutal. Number 7, Daredevil. Now, I wasn't able to find and read the actual comic that this page comes from, but I do know it is in Marvel Now issue number 11, so if you can give me more context to this moment, feel free to do so down in the comments. Essentially, Daredevil had managed to capture Wade and hog-tie him up. As Daredevil is talking with some civilians, Daredevil breaks his own fingers to escape from his confines. He then asks Daredevil where the nearest hospital is. That would be Mount Sinai Medical Center, about 5 blocks away from where they were. Deadpool tells DD that he better get a move on, as Deadpool then, out of nowhere, blasts one of the civilians in the leg. Now, Daredevil is obviously pretty peed off about this, as Deadpool damaged the civvy's femoral artery, but luckily for Daredevil, Deadpool heard Mount Sinai Medical Center is about 5 blocks away. As Deadpool storms off with Daredevil saying this isn't over, all Deadpool can say back in retort is BRB JK LOL. It's kind of funny, not gonna lie. Number 6, Daredevil again. This time I was able to find and read the actual comic. Yay! Okay, so back in the 1990s, it was quite common for comics to feature iconic duels and let the readers decide the outcomes through a voting system. 1999's Contest of Champions Volume 2 number 4 is a perfect example of this, when Daredevil faces off against Deadpool. Deadpool does not fight fair. We know this to be true from the last point, and Daredevil should too. The problem for Daredevil is that he's just too much of a good guy hero. Deadpool takes complete advantage of that fact by throwing a very tiny, wrapped up, fresh little human off of the roof that the two are fighting on. When Daredevil naturally rushes to save the little one, he goes careening off of the building, catching the wrapped up kid, and he lands in a dumpster. This is when he realizes that the kid was actually not a kid at all, but a doll of Deadpool with a tape recorder of, and I quote, authentic fake baby noisemaker guaranteed to fool superheroes every time, end quote. This is when Deadpool pops up behind Matt Murdock with his fully loaded placed squarely on DD's noggin. Luckily, we cut away before Wade finishes the job, but he got him pretty good there. Number 5, Hawkeye. Okay, now to be clear, this isn't actually Hawkeye who Wade is humbling here. This is taking place during the period of time when Norman Osborn is in charge of what he called hammer, and he has his Dark Avengers. So this is technically Bullseye dressed up as Hawkeye, just so we're clear. Now I've talked about another moment from 2008's Deadpool before, where he and Bullseye fought in a meat factory, and that was also humbling for Hawkeye / Bullseye, but this is on another level. It's also very short and sweet, so that's nice. So in the very next issue, after Bullseye recovers from their last fight in the meat factory, he sets up a trap for Deadpool, who had set up a trap for him. They made a trap for each other. Instead, Deadpool gets very frustrated and just goes out to find Lester on his own. Now, driving in a massive truck with huge massive wheels, he passes under a highway bridge where Hawkeye / Bullseye was waiting with a rocket launcher. He fires this at Deadpool, who sees it coming in the rearview mirror, and then he slams on the brakes, drifts the car sideways while rolling down the windows, allowing the rocket to just smoothly fly through the cab of the vehicle and out the opposite window, blowing up in the distance. And all Bullseye / Hawkeye can do is admit how awesome it was. Because it was awesome. It was super cool. Number 4, all of the heroes. Literally all of them. In Marvel's Dark Ages, the awakening of a cosmic war machine known as the Unmaker forced Doctor Strange to create a magically induced electromagnetic pulse that permanently shut down all electronic devices, plunging the world into darkness. Now, from the moment the mutant Apocalypse became aware of the Unmaker and the celestial level power the ancient machine possessed, he made it his mission to reawaken it and claim that power for himself. Now, knowing that he couldn't accomplish that by himself, Apocalypse kidnapped many of the world's greatest inventors and used the Purple Man's mind control abilities to force them to create a device that would allow him to merge his mind with the Unmakers. Now that is all really hard to follow, and I'm sorry, but when the heroes made their way to Europe, where Apocalypse was doing all of this, they were met by Deadpool, who acted as their guide, bringing them all the way to Apocalypse's setup in Paris. With Purple Man controlling a whole squad of mind-controlled heroes, the good guys were gonna have a hard time fighting them, except out of nowhere, Deadpool just pops a cap in Purple Man's dome, ending Purple Man's control over not just the heroes fighting them, but the ones inside helping Apocalypse with his machine. Now, Deadpool gets scolded by the other heroes, cause apparently Jessica Jones and Luke Cage were gonna knock Purple Man out, but if they had waited any longer, Apocalypse would have been able to complete his plan, so I'd say that Deadpool was right to do what he did. Number 3, Spider-Man. So kicking off right at the beginning of Deadpool Suicide Kings issue number 4, Deadpool is waking up from a characteristically weird dream where he is Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz with Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Punisher as the Cowardly Lion, Scarecrow, and the Tin Man, respectively. That all comes to an end with Tin Man Punisher taking out a little munchkin and Deadpool waking up in the Essex house distraught and met by Daredevil and Spider-Man. Now, in the previous issue, Punisher had just blown the head off of Deadpool, so in his re-healing state, Deadpool is still working to get some of his synapses firing, and Spider-Man makes the little joke of, quote, "So what was your excuse before your head exploded? Ha ha ha," which is kind of funny actually. But then Deadpool says Spidey should be off facing one of his mortal enemies, like the 90-year-old Vulture, or the "hey everyone, I'm really tall, I fight on stilts, Stilt Man," or whatever the hell Gibbon is supposed to be. But then Deadpool goes even more obscure with a reference to the villain Mindworm, who was a big-headed mutant that fed on people's emotions, and then he referenced the kangaroo. Now, of course, Spidey had his own little jabs back, but it kind of feels like when you're the kid getting roasted and you try to come up with anything to try and gain some dignity back and it doesn't work, that's what happened. Number 2, The Punisher. Now, sticking with that same comic, and even actually that same issue, now closer towards the end, Deadpool comes into contact with the Punisher, who, if you remember and were paying attention, it's cool if you weren't, in the previous issue had blown off Wade's head. Now, this was for a crime that Wade did not actually commit, so when they next come to blows inside of a club, Wade is a bit more prepared. Seeing Punisher in a reflection on a mirror, Deadpool is able to give Frank a good old kick in the gut and then send him flying out of one of the club's doors into an alleyway where the fight carries on, and honestly, it's pretty close and a very ruthless fight. Deadpool kind of has the upper hand in his speed, but they both get knocked to the ground. For me, it's the moment where Deadpool is is on the ground and he sees Castle as Satan for like a split second, he grabs Punisher by his hair and just slams him face first into the pavement, breaking the guy's nose. In return, Punisher bites off Deadpool's nose, and the whole fight sort of ends in a draw when Punisher finds out Deadpool is innocent and they go off to interrogate some criminals. Now this is the main humbling moment in my opinion. Frank is interrogating a criminal who is clearly lying, but before Frank can do anything, Deadpool blasts the guy's foot off, and when Frank asks why, Deadpool says, "Because you were going to do it, and this is my book," leaving Frank completely confused as to what's going on. And in at number 1 today, it's Captain America. The villain Dr. Bong was a goofy villain, even during the Golden Age. He has a metal ball where his left hand should be, and he uses it to create concussive blasts by striking the appendage against his bell-shaped head. That's actually what he does. Luckily though, for him, in 2010's Deadpool Volume 2, the villain was reimagined just a smidge more threateningly, having cloned a team of regenerating superheroes and also revealing himself as Deadpool's former therapist. One of these clones was Captain America, so yes, this wasn't the genuine Captain America, but he had the same appearance as the original, and seemingly he had the same abilities as well, and Deadpool sure thought he was the original. The two of these guys fought in a fair bout at first, but Deadpool felt rejected and hurt by Cap in issue number 28. After the fight is interrupted when Deadpool clearly had the upper hand, Dr. Bong demolishes the building they're all in. When everyone comes back to again in the next issue, Deadpool has everyone tied up, including the Captain America clone and the original Captain America. Through some clever interrogation and deductive reasoning about the injuries both of these Caps has sustained, he realizes that one Captain America had healed from his injuries and the other had not, making the first one Cloney McCloneface, and Deadpool blows that face off. It is bad. Coming in at number 10, it's Batman. I bet you didn't expect to see this one on the list, and honestly, who would? I know who. Anyone who knows that Batman is Batman. In 1981's DC Special Series number 27, Batman comes upon the rampaging Green Rage monster. The Joker had tricked Hulk into believing that Batman was the enemy, and the Hulk ended up getting the Dark Knight in a bear hug where he almost broke the Bat's back, but Batman busts out of it and uses a knockout gas. Now Hulk ain't really that dumb, and he just kind of holds his breath until Batman kicks him straight in the gut, winding the Hulk and causing him to breathe in the gas. Yeah, it's probably unrealistic as hell, but it's a man that fights criminals in a bat suit fighting a guy that turns into a giant green monster because of gamma rays from a bomb. Tell me how that's realistic. Number 9, Thor. When Kal Borson, the Serpent, sent down 7 magical hammers that represented his 7 magical followers to Earth, the hammer Null found its way to our lovely green friend, transforming him into Null, Breaker of Worlds. Now Hulk/Null went a-smashin', rampaging all over South America, bringing him into conflict with the Avengers, who he defeated, and eventually with a solo Thor. When fighting Thor, Null teamed up with angrier Breaker of Souls, which was actually Ben Grimm the Thing. So not only is Thor taking on the Hulk, who is more than a handful, but he took on the Thing, one of Hulk's biggest rivals, at the same time, and both of these guys were powered up by the magical hammers that they wielded. Thor then proceeds to literally and temporarily take the Thing's life by throwing Mjolnir straight through him, leaving a massive hole in the Thing's chest. Thor and the Hulk then face off in an epic battle that ends with Thor managing to knock the Hulk into space, leaving Thor seriously injured, but winning the fight. Number 8, Wolverine. Wolverine actually made his debut in 1974's The Incredible Hulk number 181. He interfered in a fight between the Hulk and the Wendigo, which saw Wolvie and Hulk team up to beat the monster, but also saw a little kerfuffle between Big Green and the Angry Canadian. Now 8 years later, What If number 31 imagined what would have happened if Wolverine managed to take down the Hulk, which he did by clawing through his throat. Pretty nasty. But their nastiest bout was definitely in Old Man Logan. Following a huge conflict where the villains managed to band together and wipe out almost all the heroes, a pretty sinister Bruce Banner took over a section of California with his inbred kids, the Hulk Gang. In the last few issues of that story, in revenge for the Hulk wiping out his family, Wolverine went on the warpath and eradicated most of the gang. Banner then hulked out into this 30-foot tall, nasty Hulk and ate Wolverine alive, only for Wolverine to reform inside of his stomach and cut his way out. The Hulk would survive as a head on a metal body after this, only for the sole surviving Hulk gang member to decapitate him to save Wolverine's life later on. The living head would then be buried deep underground to keep it from ever coming back again. Number 7, Iron Man. We all know of the famous Hulkbuster suit, but would it just blow your minds if I told you that Iron Man has actually defeated the Hulk without it? Yes, that is right. In Iron Man issue 132, our Golden Avenger faced off mano-a-mano against the strongest Green Avenger, and when I tell you this was one hell of a fight, I ain't lying. After an attempt at helping Bruce Banner results in the Hulk persona emerging, Tony dons his suit and protects his employees. The fight goes from Stark Industries to underwater to an Air Force base, where the two basically play baseball with a luggage carrier and Tony's favorite jet. The resulting explosions stunned the Hulk, and in that moment, Tony mustered every bit of solar and reserve energy he could, overriding the safety protocols of his own suit to hit the stunned Hulk with a singular, massive punch that knocked out Hulk and killed that suit of armor completely. Number 6, Robert Downey Jr. The MCU gave us a good look at just why Iron Man is no pushover when it pitted a rage off the hinges Hulk against the newly unveiled Hulkbuster armor created by Tony Stark. Now this fight is awesome. First off, the high-octane speed of it keeps it engaging literally the whole time. Secondly, it perfectly shows how much of a threat the Hulk can actually pose and how absolutely terrifying he actually is. And thirdly, bouncing off of that, Robert Downey Jr. shows us both how utterly terrifying it would be to fight a monster like the Hulk in a suit of armor, but while still remaining incredibly hilarious and delivering every line with a perfect mix of fear, humor, and high stress that the 4-minute and 20-second scene deserves. Like, how could we forget the go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep thing? That's so funny. And bonus points for the end of the scene when the Hulk finally sees the amount of destruction and pain he has caused. It lets us into his mind just a little bit until Iron Man knocks him out cold. Number 5, Hyperion. Hulk has only had a handful of battles against one of Marvel's iterations of a Superman-like character, Hyperion. And funnily enough, this time it's almost always Hyperion who comes out on top. Hyperion hails from a different universe from Earth 616 and is usually the leader of a group of Justice League-like heroes called the Squadron Supreme. Hyperion and Hulk were both on the Avengers at the same time, and the two were pitted against one another in a couple of instances. In Jonathan Hickman's 2013 Avengers run, issue number 3, a brainwashed Hulk is sicked on a Hyperion, and while the battle kind of happens in the background, Hyperion manages to punch the Hulk out of the Hulk, turning him back into Bruce Banner again. Now that is a feat all of its own, but there was another fight more recently in Heroes Reborn number 2 by Jason Aaron. This story found a new Hyperion who had just wiped out Galactus by flying straight through his head, fought off against versions of Gladiator and the Imperial Guard, Mr. Beyonder, and a giant version of Ultron. The last thing he needed to do was stop the Hulk. Hyperion finds him trying to tell a group of kids about how he's not crazy, how history has changed, and how he's really sad, which makes it almost upsetting after the Hulk gets his hands on Hyperion's throat, and Hyperion invokes an executive order and uses his laser eyes to blow holes in the Hulk, taking his life 24 times until he finally stops getting back up. Number 4, Spider-Man. Now, in terms of raw power, Spider-Man stands absolutely no chance against the Hulk. I think his spider sense may give him some kind of advantage, but there's no way he's lasting long in that fight. Unless he gets a power boost in the form of, I don't know, the Enigma Force turning him into Captain Universe, maybe? And that's exactly what happened in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 328. The Grey Hulk, who yes, is a bit weaker and logical compared to his savage counterpart, is hired by Sebastian Shaw to target Spider-Man, and money is always a good motivator. Unfortunately though, for the Hulk, Spider-Man has been going to the cosmic gym and hitting the cosmic weights. He lands some pretty heavy blows on the Grey Goliath and even blinds him with a new I-beam power. But when some kids are put in danger though, Spider-Man ends the conflict quick by punching the Hulk all the way into orbit and then flying up to save him before he suffocates. Then Spider-Man just stands all confident with his hands on his hips, kind of like this, but like more confident, you know what I mean? Number 3, Havoc. Havoc, who you may know as the brother of Cyclops, found himself in quite the showdown with the Green Goliath in Incredible Hulk number 150. It all started with a little bit of a mix-up. You see, the Hulk thought that Polaris was his long-lost love, Jarella, the Princess of Kai from the Microverse. So in his confusion and a little bit of heartbreak, he whisked Polaris up a cliff, and Havoc, being the hero that he is and also Polaris' boyfriend, rushed to the rescue. In an attempt to fend off the Hulk, Havoc unleashed his powerful energy waves, but here's the thing. This attack did absolutely nothing. It didn't really do anything to the Hulk at all, so it was looking pretty rough for Havoc until he spotted an opportunity. The Hulk, being just absolutely off the chain, decided to pick up a small mountain, like you do. And that's when Havoc hatched a cunning plan. He focused all of his energy waves like a laser beam, aiming right at the Hulk's big green forehead. Now this seriously strained the Hulk as he grappled with the weight of the mountain that he chose to pick up like an idiot. The combined stress of the mountain and Havoc's energy waves got to be too much for the Hulk, and he eventually passed out, dropping a mountain on himself. For Havoc, that is a huge win. Number 2, Namor. Namor, the Prince of Atlantis, has a level of strength that I think surprises a lot of people, and it may be because his level of power is closely tied to his proximity to water. When submerged, his strength is unrivaled. He can even lift and throw massive and heavy objects like water-filled ocean liners. So, if the Hulk were to challenge Namor, the smart move would be to battle on dry land. However, the Hulk's not that smart. In Avengers number 3, the Hulk made the error of confronting Namor in the water. And a few panels later, Namor managed to drag the unconscious Hulk to the shore. Namor's water-based advantage came into play once more in Tales to Astonish number 100, where he used it to defeat the Green Goliath. Their powerful blows generated a massive tsunami that destroyed an entire island base. Interestingly though, even in more casual contests, Namor has outperformed the Hulk. In an unconventional power test, to engage in a game of underwater chicken in Incredible Hulk number 118, and neither of these guys chickened out as you might expect. But in the end, Namor emerged unscathed, while the Hulk was knocked out completely, reverting to his form as Banner. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's The Thing. The Thing and the Incredible Hulk are kind of like the Marvel Universe's version of Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. I read an article that said that, and I think it's funny and I think it's true, so I'm using it. They share a complicated friendship, filled with epic battles, usually resulting in a draw, or the Hulk will take the win. However, back in 1961, The Thing managed to secure a win. It's essential to note that the Hulk was in his gray or Joe Fixit form, which is a lesser known persona. Unlike the Green Hulk, this version, Joe Fixit, is more intelligent and has better reasoning abilities, meaning he doesn't get as angry as quickly. And we all know that the Hulk's strength amplifies with his anger, so Grey Hulk isn't as mighty as the Green version. Additionally, during this particular face-off, the Thing was in his super spiky form, making it a remarkable matchup. In Fantastic Four number 320, Dr. Doom goads Hulk into chasing after the Thing, saying he's powered up and stronger than Hulk is, and you know that's gonna piss off the Hulk. Hulk sets out to New York to defeat the Thing, but gets his butt handed to him. After a slog of a fight that will cost taxpayers a ton, the Thing almost ends up putting the Hulk into the afterlife until he's caught off guard by this really random Hulk robot that just comes out of nowhere. It's weird. I don't know.
When it comes to the Hulk, there was a time where he ended up humbling the X-Men. Now, this was during World War Hulk. Hulk blamed a group of people for sending him to space, known as the Illuminati. The Illuminati are their own secret group, made up of a bunch of guys who basically consider themselves to be among the elite when it comes to the smartest people on Earth. Not every genius hero has joined them though. In fact, some who were offered a place originally on the team were wise enough to decline that offer. And when I say wise, I kinda mean it, as this is the team who ultimately did decide to send Hulk to space because he was considered too much of a danger on Earth. Hulk is sent away but returns to Earth for revenge due to the spaceship that he landed in exploding, destroying the new place that he had come to call his home. You may recognize its name, Sakaar. One person who he blames is an Illuminati member, Charles Xavier, though Charles was not actually at the meeting when it was decided to send Hulk away. When Hulk comes a calling on the X-Men, he manages to beat them pretty badly. Fortunately, they are able to kind of shame him with some words into just like stopping his rampage here. Still safe to say that the X-Men would struggle in a fight against someone as powerful as the Hulk. If you had to say anyone that you feel like would struggle in a fight against the Hulk, who do you think that would be? If the Hulk can take on, you know, most of the X-Men, pretty impressive. Spider-Man is a hero who ended up besting the X-Men when two of them were possessed by the Phoenix Force. Yep, you heard that right, the Phoenix force. How did he do it? Well, actually not with his fists, but with his wits. Spider-Man was actually just squaring off with them to give the Avengers some time to retreat, but he managed to do one better after he manipulated Magic and Colossus, sister and brother, into turning on one another. Tony at least has tried to humble the X-Men. Now, he wasn't as successful as some others that are on our list, but he did try to do so by comparing kind of hands with them. Not a great move on his part, to be honest. This all went down during the first Civil War when he had a chat with Emma Frost, one of his ex-flames to be honest. He attempted to compare the Avengers to the X-Men, saying that they also had to deal with prejudice too. However, while he did attempt to humble Emma into backing down, this ultimately backfired, causing her to remind him of just how much hate and prejudice mutants had to deal with, including, you know, things like the catastrophic events that happened on Genosha. Don't think the Avengers have ever had that level of hate thrown against them, you know what I mean? While the covers for the Fantastic Four versus the X-Men comic from the 80s would leave you believing that the FF were the ones who were very much bested here, in the end they were actually the ones who kinda got the last laugh, with the little Franklin Richards joining forces with Lockheed and actually flying in and pretty much shaming everyone in the end with the state of Kitty Pryde, who was actually not doing so well at this time, and I believe it's kind of at the center of this conflict. I just love Franklin flying in and basically being like, are you guys really fighting right now? Like, Kitty is maybe about to die. Like, hello? Just a little, of course a little kid would just come in and be like, hey, everyone, let's just chill out. In this turn of events, Cyclops played right into Wade Wilson's hands. This was when Deadpool was given temporary membership to the X-Men. It turns out though that they had basically only offered Deadpool a place on the team, a temporary place on the team, because they wanted to keep a close eye on him, because yeah, they didn't trust him. While hurt by this revelation, Deadpool still did his best to play his part as an X-Men, regardless of whether or not his membership was considered to be real, by helping the mutants out. He even took the fall for them to help save their public image, and then in the end antagonized Psyche so that he'd fight an unmasked Deadpool while Wade was wearing his own unofficial X-Men costume. Once again to help them with PR. In the end, while he didn't want to, Cyclops was forced to admit that indeed Deadpool did have moves. The Inhumans gave the mutants a run for their money sort of accidentally during IVX, Inhumans vs X-Men. During this event, the Inhumans didn't really intend to hurt the X-Men, it was more of just a thing that like kinda happened here. This happened when the Inhumans' Terrigen clouds were released into Earth's atmosphere. They didn't know at the time, but it turned out that the Terrigen mists were actually really poisonous to mutants, even fatal. Cyclops early on actually died as a result of exposure, but Emma Frost, seeking to get revenge on the Inhumans, decided to make it seem as though Black Bolt had actually killed Cyclops during what could have ended up being peace talks had Emma not, you know, been manipulating this whole scenario. Instead, communication broke down and it ended up being an all-out war between the two sides, although eventually the mutants would realize that Emma had basically manipulated them into fighting this war against the Inhumans, and the X-Men and Inhumans would ultimately kind of team up to take down Emma. Black Panther managed to humble, or at least shame, one X-Men during the Ten of Swords event in the lead up to the Otherworld tournament. In the lead up to the tournament, both Arakko and Krakoa were basically given a list of champions, and each champion had a specific blade, a specific sword, you know, Ten of Swords, they had to recover to be able to enter this tournament. Storm's blade was located in Wakanda and was basically tied to the heritage and the lore of the people and the land. Storm went to Wakanda and asked for this blade, which was a super important item to them, but was told she would basically have to wait until Black Panther had returned because he was kind of the one that had to make that call. However, worrying that the delay would basically mean that she would miss the deadline to enter and possibly not confident in maybe what Black Panther's answer would be, considering they have a romantic history, but it's also gone really bad before in the past, Storm instead decided to put her thief hat back on and just steal the weapon. Right after she'd acquired it and was kinda on her way out the door, Black Panther arrived back at the palace and basically confronted her, not taking the blade back, but basically condemning her for choosing to steal it in the first place and for her lack of faith in both him and in Wakanda. I love how the X-Men are constantly working to humble each other, like when Emma Frost decided to call Professor X out for how he treated and kind of manipulated Scott Summers over the years. She put a plant sort of in his mind and managed in essence to take control of his psyche to kind of torment him, but also to make him see why Scott basically didn't need him anymore and how he'd actually done a lot of harm to Cyclops over the years. This all went down in X-Men Legacy issue number 216 and also stood to show just how powerful of a telepath Emma Frost truly is. During Executioner's Song, a whole X-Men team ended up being taken out by, get this, Wolverine. See what I'm saying? X-Men fighting X-Men. what's going on? Granted, it wasn't the X-Men team, but it was an X-Men adjacent team, so I think we can count it. After taking out Shatterstar, the X-Force team would also be tracked down by Wolverine and taken out primarily by him and by Psylocke, forced to surrender to the Blue X-Men and X-Factor teams respectively, and they were backed into a corner fairly easily, honestly, with Wolverine choosing to hunt them down and citing it as one of the things he is best known for, which honestly, true. Although I imagine X-Force, like the other teams here, also felt pretty conflicted about fighting against their friends. So this, combined with Wolverine's ruthlessness, probably helped to convince them to, maybe just surrender. You've probably heard of a little well-known event called Avengers vs. X-Men. This event stood to highlight some of the feuds, some of the tension between these two teams and their individual members that had been brewing for, honestly, years. Chiefly though, the fight was over the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix was returning to bond with, as the mutants believe, its current ideal host, Hope Summers. At least that was their working theory. They didn't know for sure. The Avengers, because, they didn't know for sure what was going on with this, wanted it gone. They felt it was too dangerous, the two fought, which now seems ironic, since although the Phoenix has long been linked to mutants and of course mutant-based stories, and the Avengers were very anti-Phoenix at this time, the Avengers also recently had the Phoenix as a member on their team when the Phoenix Force was merged with Echo, aka Maya Lopez. So it's pretty funny in retrospect when we think about that.
The early Spider-Man comics really put a focus on showing Spider-Man was a tough foe to beat. Even the X-Men had a hard time subduing the Spider. Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars 3 showed the iconic fight between Spider-Man and the X-Men, where it wasn't much of a fight for Spider-Man. He literally bursts onto the scene, taking out Cyclops and Professor X right from the get-go. He is leaping out of reach and backflipping out of range. His webs are a vital tool here. They suspend some team members and are said on panel to be stronger than steel. During the fight, after getting trapped in a web, Nightcrawler thinks to himself, his strength, his speed, unbelievable, he is awesome. Me too, Nightcrawler. Even when humbled, talent recognizes talent. Wolverine even yells as Spidey is swinging out that he made the team look like fools and amateurs. Spider-Man and Superboy went toe-to-toe, and now Superboy knows what it feels like to be squashed by a spider. This one might be controversial for this list, since there was a bit of a God in the machine happening here. For this face-off, lots of DC and Marvel characters were pit against each other, and fans could vote which character of a face-off they wanted to see win. So Spider-Man ended up winning that, which is humbling on its own, but then that is why he won the battle in the comic too. It's not like the comic battle wasn't good though. Spidey held his own against Superboy. At one point, a water tower gets busted and floods where the two heroes are fighting. Superboy moves to attack Spider-Man, but instead he gets a personal web experience and crashes into a high voltage box, and you can imagine how that went in the water. The fight was over, Superboy was cooked. The hero for hire Luke Cage became the humbled hero for hire after a tussle with Spider-Man. Cage was hired by J. Jonah Jameson because he hates Spider-Man and he thinks he caused the death of Norman Osborn. Technically Peter did, but no one knows Norman was the Green Goblin, so everyone just thinks that Spider-Man took out a random well-known figure. Luke was hired by Jameson to take out the dangerous Spidey. Jameson offered to pay Cage $5,000 for the job. This comic came out in the 1970s. Take a guess how much $5,000 is today. Over $35,000. J. Jonah Jameson was willing to pay $35,000 to get rid of Spider-Man. He hates him. He never ended up paying the money because, spoiler, the fight with Cage ends with Cage on Spider-Man's side, but it was tough to get him there. Spidey ends up pinning Cage with his webs. He can't move his arms. Once again, Cage is super strong, so it's amazing this is working. While pinned down, Spider-Man is able to explain his side of the story, leading to Cage taking Peter's side and rejecting the job. Humbled him so hard, he quit. It's hard to win against someone who literally can't die and can heal from anything, i.e. Deadpool, and yet Spidey does manage to humble the merc with a mouth every once in a while. It depends on the universe, of course, but one time Spidey was the victor was in Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon. The episode is ridiculous, it has Deadpool in it. It's expected. Deadpool transports him and Spidey to a different realm that is very silly. Spider-Man turns into a whale at one point, there are barn animals, truly it's wild, but Spidey comes out on top, defeating Deadpool by throwing a book of morality at him. Knowing the character, funny funniest choice Marvel could have made. When it comes to speed, Spider-Man is tough to beat. Not even Wonder Woman stood a chance. There is an Earth out there with all our favorite DC and Marvel heroes, and it's not Hollywood, it's Earth 7642. It was featured in Marvel Treasury Edition 28. In this story, Spider-Man and Wonder Woman end up fighting each other, but only because Wonder Woman doesn't know Spidey that well and thought he was a threat. In her words, it's Spidey's fault that people don't trust him at first because he has a pretty creepy routine. Spider-Man does acknowledge that the spider thing might be unsettling, but in the actual fight, Wonder Woman is throwing more punches. Spidey is holding back because he knows they're both good guys. He just needs Wonder Woman to stop long enough to explain himself. To Wonder Woman's dismay, she clocks that Spidey is way faster than she is, even saying that she is plodding along compared to Peter. She's further humbled when the lights go out and Peter technically has the upper hand because of his spider sense. Fun fact, Superman and the Hulk face off against each other in this comic. Spider-Man tried to stop the Hulk first, but Supes wouldn't allow it. Spider-Man got his chance to fight the Hulk later. One of the earlier times Spidey fought the Hulk was in Amazing Spider-Man 328. In that issue, Hulk remarks that Spidey was a lot stronger than he remembered, and Spider-Man ends up winning the fight because Hulk had to escape because the sun was coming up and at this point he could only Hulk out at night. Kind of like a vampire. A later fight between the two happened on the news. We watched it as if we were sitting in our local bar, which was kind of fun. The broadcast shows a tough fight between the heroes. Hulk looks like he's winning at one point, patrons start placing bets, but then Spidey kicks the Hulk into a wall and a cement truck falls on him. The Hulk is done hulking and is now under a cement truck sulking. There were a few other times when the heroes brawled, but some of them had outside factors that made the fight kind of unfair, like tranquilizer gas for the Hulk. Peter has told MJ that he thinks he can kill the Hulk, but he has a no-kill rule and never wants to have to make that choice. Spider-Man once gave his all and literally fought to make the Fantastic Four the Fantastic Five. The very first issue of the Amazing Spider-Man comics kicked off the series with a big bang. Spider-Man brawled the Fantastic Four for a shot on the team, and he did it for a number of reasons. One, he was just starting out and deemed an outlaw in his city, so joining an established super team would improve his image, and two, Spider-Man is poor. That has been drilled into our heads since, well, this comic. So Spidey wanted to join the team in the hopes that they would pay him and he could keep his secret identity. Spidey jumped into the F4 headquarters through a window but got trapped in a fancy glass cage. He was infiltrating their headquarters after all. He used his strength to escape the cage, punched the thing clear across the room right into the Human Torch. He used his webs to trap Mr. Fantastic's hands. His spider sense helped him find and trap the Invisible Woman, and when the Human Torch started throwing his fire, Spidey effortlessly leapt out of reach. He really was showing off here to try and make that team. Spidey ended up not joining the team when he found out they don't pay a salary. Spider-Man ends up fighting the Chameleon and news of his strength and power makes the rounds. The comic ends with the F4 reading about Spidey and remarking how strong he is and what his future will be and if they should worry about him. Captain America may have humbled Spider-Man in the MCU, but it's a very different story in the comics. Cap even once admitted that he wasn't as strong as Spider-Man. But the true humbling Cap-Peter moment happened in an alleyway. Peter at this point, he's wanted by the FBI, when is he not? Cap is trying to reason with Peter, but Peter is having a rough go of it. Cap ends up getting punched in the face, but he is holding back a bit I think because he can tell that Peter is just acting out because he's going through it, but he does still experience quite a humbling moment on Peter's behalf. Cap takes his shield to block another punch. Peter grabs that shield and smashes it in the Captain's face. I wouldn't leave my house for a day if someone beat me with the symbol of my superhero persona, and then to top it off, Peter escaped, adding some salt to the wound. Miles Morales, the main character of the Spider-Verse movies, he humbled all Spider-Men in a way that I have never seen before. Truly, if I was there, I would be so embarrassed. I'm talking about the scene in the second movie when he's running away from like literally every spider person and animal and machine and car and ever evades all of them. He truly is the main character. Sure, he had a bit of help from some friends, but every spider in the universe is coming after him and he escaped. We have to give him his flowers. Iron Man might be a father figure to Peter, but that doesn't mean Spidey will pull his punches when they fight. The Spider-Man and Iron Man of the MCU are so tame in comparison to the comic versions of themselves. Like, MCU Tony would give Peter a juice box and play catch in the backyard. Comic Tony has tried throwing Peter across Manhattan. The Iron Man suit, it is very powerful. It's got top tech in it, Tony is very smart, but he is just an average, vulnerable man without his suit. And he tends to forget that and needs a little reminder every once in a while. Spider-Man has given him that reminder quite a few times. In Amazing Spider-Man 536, Iron Man is after Spidey because Peter is against the Superhuman Registration Act. Peter wins the fight, he overrides Iron Man's armor and then webs him in the face for good measure. Amazing Spider-Man Annual 20 features a bunch of Tony-like time travel stuff, but the important thing to this video is that Spider-Man gets really mad at Tony at one point and throws him into a construction site and then attacks Tony until Tony is saved by time shifting out of that reality and back to his reality. There have been many times that Superman and Batman are pitted against each other. It's always a fun story and it's always a big seller. And for some reason, we tend to see Batman with the edge, but not always. In Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, Lex Luthor gives Bruce Wayne a shard of green kryptonite to use in a fight against Superman. Historically, this has always been an issue for Superman, but in this story, he shows just how easily he can wipe the floor with Batman when he just uses his super breath to blow the kryptonite out of his hands. That's all he had to do. After it falls to the ground, Superman drags Batman through the air and drops him. Superman throws a punch at Batman, but just as he's about to turn Batman into a crushed tomato, he stops just to prove a point. Superman can easily destroy Batman if he wants to. Yes, Bruce can win and has multiple times, but with so much more effort than Superman would ever need, and this proves it. Superman has also had several clashes with other members of the Trinity. Wonder Woman. A lot of these clashes are actually pretty interesting. Superman is Superman. He's fast, he's strong, he has a lot of other various powers, but Wonder Woman is no pushover. There have been many encounters where she has absolutely destroyed the Man of Steel. She knocked him out in one kick, snapped his arm like a twig, and in one story she even completely ended his life when she used some kryptonite as sharp brass knuckles. However, in Superman, the Man of Tomorrow number 13, titled Madness, having had it up to here with humanity and their shenanigans, Superman throws all the world's nuclear weapons into the sun, distracting the JLA with an army of Superman robots. Wonder Woman and friends recruit the new god Orion and even Green Lantern to create kryptonite, but despite everyone's combined might, Superman still takes the day. Sometimes we just love to see our DC heroes take on our Marvel heroes. One of several intercompany crossovers between Marvel and DC, JLA/Avengers, pitted the company's greatest heroes against each other. This was awesome. It created some of the most iconic fight scenes in superhero comic books, with classic heroes battling it out in feuds formerly confined to fans' imaginations and late-night backyard table debates. One of the most interesting fights happened when the Asgardian Thor attacked Superman. Now, I would love to see someone do all the research and decide who would realistically win this conflict, but in the comic, Thor at first seemingly overpowers Superman using his magical hammer, and that is fair. What may not surprise many, however, is that Superman is actually quite the worthy fellow. He catches the mallet before sending Thor flying, using his own hammer back on him. Of course, Superman can lift it. His fight with Thor ends with Superman saying Thor might have been his toughest opponent yet. This one isn't really so much a humbling as it is a complete and brutal slaying of a fan-loved character. Needless to say, things get kind of taken to another level in the comic Superman Batman issue 14 from 2005, titled Pretenders to the Throne. In this story, Batman and Superman have become villains and rule over the entire USA. In one of the comic's more awful scenes, Batman brings Superman to their fellow Justice Leaguer Green Arrow as some kind of sick, twisted birthday present, also they can pummel him together. In a bit of a shock move, Green Arrow actually gets Supes with a kryptonite arrow. Unfortunately, that arrow seems to only make Batman more angry, and after taking his body and hitting him with it, Batman completely lays into Green Arrow. That is until Superman pops back up and completely disintegrates Arrow with his heat vision. Yikes. Next up is another Marvel and DC fight. However, in this big encounter, instead of an Asgardian god, we get to see DC's most famous superhero taking on the poster boy of Marvel, Spider-Man. In terms of star power, it sounds like a great face-off. The problem is, in terms of raw power, Spidey's odds of winning this encounter were never good. It took a little help from Lex Luthor to give Peter a fighting chance. Lois Lane and Mary Jane had both been kidnapped, and both heroes were blaming the other. They squared off, but not before Luthor irritated Spider-Man with energy mimicking a red sun, leaving the Kryptonian vulnerable. impossible. Spider-Man was actually holding his own for a while, but then the radiation wore off and he was left with just his normal strength. Just punching Superman broke Spider-Man's hand, and Clark held back from fighting anymore because he knew he could kill Peter with one punch. Yes, I am back again with another Marvel hero, no Asgardian though, no Spider-Boy. This time, the Hulk is definitely a bit more of a challenge. So Banner and Superman have actually fought each other a few different times. They've traded some wins, so you can't say that one is definitely stronger than the other, but it's nonetheless impressive that Superman has been able to take out someone as strong as the Hulk. Maybe what gave Clark the edge on the occasion I'm talking about today was that innocent people were in danger. Thanks to some meddling from Lex Luthor, Bruce Banner lost control of himself and went on a rampage as the Hulk in Metropolis. Superman tried to fight him there, but civilians were getting caught up in the battle. To keep anyone else from getting hurt, Clark fought the Hulk all the way to the Fortress of Solitude, but even then, Banner wasn't showing any signs of calming down. Left with little choice, Superman ended the fight by knocking the Hulk out of this world, literally. Clark punched the Hulk into the Phantom Zone, bringing the fight to a close. There are few in the DC comics that can actually stand up to the Man of Steel. Shazam, maybe one of them. There's also Orion, and there is also the hero known as Captain Atom. In the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, we saw a fight between these two during the Flashpoint episode. While Superman and Huntress are after the hero, the Question, the one standing in their way was Captain Atom. This led to Superman coming to the Question's defense. With super strength and the power to control radiation, Captain Atom has always put up a good fight against the Man of Steel, especially in the Injustice comics. Even here in the cartoon form, Captain Atom is actually putting up a good fight against the Man of Steel, with each hero trading super-powered blows that send each other crashing through walls. At the end of the day, it was Captain Atom who started to tire first, and Clark began dodging his strikes, sending Atom face first into a concrete wall. With one final uppercut, Superman KO'd the irritated hero and brought the conflict to an end. There are many powerful items in the DC universe. Arguably the most powerful among them is the ring of a Green Lantern. Sure, there are items that definitely seem more powerful, the helmet of Naboo and the mother boxes for example, but the Green Lantern ring is limited only by the user's imagination. This limitless potential puts the power of a Green Lantern in a league of their own. Superman has come to blows with the Green Lanterns on previous occasions and has been held back and down a few times, but more recently was the confrontation between the character and Hal Jordan, which came during 2011's Justice League comic. In the New 52, during a misunderstanding, Superman holds Batman in his iron grip, and in an attempt to restrain Superman, Hal uses his ring to create chains to hold the Kryptonian down. However, Superman simply smirks and exclaims, "Chains? Really?" and he just shatters them like glass by flexing. Hal panics and uses his ring to create a bubble to escape with Batman in, and it's kind of hilarious. When the topic of how one would go about defeating Superman comes up, kryptonite is the one solution that even non-comic book fans are aware of. However, unbeknownst to some, there are other forces in the DC universe that can subdue and even incapacitate the Man of Steel. One of those forces is magic. In the DC universe, the potential power of magic and those who can harness it are limitless. One powerful magic user who is often put up against Superman by fans is Shazam. The mightiest mortal found himself on Superman's bad side in the New 52. As Shazam is about to spread the ashes of a loved one, he is attacked by soldiers. Confused and angry, Shazam charges at the soldiers, but is stopped by Superman. Due to his magical abilities, Shazam is able to inflict damage on Superman. However, Kal-El is still able to stop the guy in his tracks. Trying to find instances where the Man of Steel fights his fellow heroes is actually harder than you think, especially if we are trying to show him humbling said heroes. If we switch to the world of DC's Injustice Gods Among Us, then that really doesn't stand true anymore. Superman fights many heroes. He also completely eradicates a few. Some of these are incredibly brutal, with a big shout out to the fight against Shazam as being incredibly harrowing, but it's the fight against Hawkman I want to talk about here. In the Injustice Gods Among Us story, Hawkman engages Superman in combat trying to subdue this out-of-control Superman. After he is abandoned by his wife, Hawkwoman, the Thanagarian hero puts up a commendable effort, striking the Man of Steel several times with a kryptonite-laced mace. Despite this impressive display of heroics, Hawkman is defeated as he is burned to cinders by Superman's heat vision. Hawkman looks utterly humiliated and heartbroken.
Coming in at number 10 today is Batman and Oliver Queen. In the exceedingly famous Dark Knight Returns story, we see what is arguably one of the best Superman vs. Batman fights to ever grace comic books. In the last issue, number 4, it pits an aged Bruce Wayne against a Superman that has become a puppet of the government. During the fight, Superman has been weakened by a nuclear explosion, Hunter missiles, a tank, a sonic device that makes his nose bleed, and Batman even uses every watt of the city's power to electrocute Superman's brain. Batman then socks Superman straight across the face a few times and shoots acid into his face, but then Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, shoots an arrow made of kryptonite at the Man of Steel while upside down with his one remaining arm and his teeth while dangling from a fire escape. It sounds nuts. While Superman catches the arrow, it still weakens him, which is when he takes a studded bat boot to the jaw. Batman then seemingly passes to the pearly gates from a heart attack. Even at 55 though, Bruce Wayne left Superman battered and bleeding, and the whole thing was just a ruse. Well played. Number 9, Wonder Woman Dead Earth. This comic picks up an apocalyptic wasteland in what used to be Gotham City. Now deep down in the remnants of the Batcave, Wonder Woman had been kept alive in a containment unit and was awoken by a group of humans who were running from a mutated monster known as a Hydra. After saving the Humies and liberating their city, she journeys to Themyscira only to find out that the Hydra are actually her fellow Amazons mutated by atomic radiation after the Amazons had decided to go to war with the rest of humanity who had driven the Earth to its breaking point. The world had basically bombarded Themyscira with nuclear fire, even though Diana used the absolute limits of her powers to try and stop it. Now when Superman, who fought for humanity, turned up to try and explain why he couldn't have helped her, we see just how powerful this Wonder Woman is. Losing complete control of herself, Wonder Woman and Superman fought each other to the point of causing a great fire that plunged the world into the apocalypse. And at the end of that fight, Wonder Woman, who was double fisting some kryptonite, brought Superman to his final rest with a hole straight through the chest. Number 8, Injustice Wonder Woman. The Injustice comics are packed with intense battles, but the confrontation between Wonder Woman and Superman in the 8th issue of Injustice Gods Among Us, Year 4, orchestrated by Batman, is particularly memorable. Due to a deal struck up with the gods that is then refused and countered by Wonder Woman, who is working alongside Superman, she instead demands a trial by combat, and after Superman volunteers to represent his side of things, Wonder Woman is chosen by Batman as the combatant to face Superman. Now being a warrior born, in a fight to the death, she is honor bound to go all in. It is a brutal showdown. The two warriors initially appear evenly matched, but then Superman gains the upper hand, somehow. Despite Superman's plea for Diana to surrender, her refusal to yield becomes his downfall. Wonder Woman intensifies her assault, leveraging her superior combat skills and exploiting Clark's moment of hesitation. Wonder Woman gouges Superman's eyes, and in a swift move, she completely shatters his arm with a strong elbow, like that, marking one of the most brutal conclusions to their long-lasting history of clashes. Despite Superman's desperate attempts to retaliate, deploying all the power he has, he is relentlessly overpowered and ultimately knocked out cold. Number 7, Russian Batman. In this dystopian Earth number 30, where Superman became a tool of Stalin and his Soviet Union, Batman has become the most wanted man in Russia. As an adult, he became a blight on the Soviets and terrorized them all for revenge on Pyotr Roslov, the captain of the police who brought the demise of Bruce's parents. He became an idol for those who wanted to oppose Superman and his regime. Now eventually, Roslov turned on Superman and convinced Batman to take him down. So, he stole Wonder Woman, bound her up with her own lasso, and drew Superman into a trap where he then bombarded the hero with simulated red sunlight. He forced the weakened Superman into a cellar to lock him away forever, but alas, Wonder Woman managed to destroy her lasso and remove the generator powering the lamps. Unwilling to be locked up and lobotomized, Batman detonated a little boom boom that he implanted within his own small intestine, but before he passed, Batman revealed to Superman the truth of Roslov's treachery and got his revenge in a really roundabout kind of way. Number 6, Muhammad Ali. Undoubtedly one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport, this legendary fighter has won some incredible fights. But what other boxer can claim to have TKO'd Superman himself? After aliens demanded that Earth's greatest champion battle their own warrior, Superman and Ali go one-on-one to determine who will represent Earth in the upcoming fight. With Superman temporarily depowered when he steps into the ring, Ali, with his superior skill, completely puts Superman in his place, with Superman falling to the mat after taking a hail of punches. Afterwards, the pair teamed up to help drive back the invading aliens, and the whole story was published in a special issue back in 1978 and reissued more recently in 2010. Number 5, Shazam. Now everyone knows that Superman is weak to kryptonite. It's one of his few main weaknesses. Another one of those rare weaknesses would be magic. Many magic-wielding superheroes exist in the DC universe, but of all of them, Billy Batson's alter ego Shazam, or Captain Marvel if we want to be problematic, is one of the only main ones that can also compare on a physical level with the Man of Steel. Shazam has been sent out against the Man of Steel on many different occasions, and while his magic does give him a distinct advantage, the fact that he's actually a kid usually means that Superman can outthink or outstrategize him. But then, the magic kind of levels the playing field. Despite that though, Shazam has completely knocked out Superman in 1997's JLA issue 29. Now to be fair, he totally sucker punched Superman, but that was just the first punch. He then followed that up with a few lightning-infused punches that completely floored the man. More recently though, in Batman/Superman 2019, issue number 2, the Joker infected several different heroes with Joker toxin, including Shazam, and he faced Superman mano a mano. And we get a hand-wavy reason for why Superman will never beat Shazam in normal fights. It's simply because every time he goes to punch Shazam, all he can see is Billy Batson, and he falters. Superman is just too much of a good guy to hit Billy, and so he gets hit much harder in return. Number 4, Venom. Now, to be fair, this is back when Venom was not a superhero, but he is now, so fair game, I say. Superman and Venom cross paths in the DC Marvel All Access crossover event in 1996 and 1997. This encounter occurred when the two universes merged temporarily, causing confusion and displacement among characters. Venom found himself in Metropolis wreaking havoc and searching for answers. Now, upon stealing a young woman, Superman intervened to rescue her. Their battle proved to be one of Superman's toughest challenges ever, resulting in one of his most humbling defeats. Venom matched Superman's incredible strength, withstanding the hero's attacks and immobilizing/blinding Superman with webbing, leaving him vulnerable. Superman used his heat vision to free himself, and he pursued Venom, but while Superman landed punches, Venom remained pretty much unaffected. With a vendetta against both Superman and Spider-Man, Venom nearly smothered Superman with his tendrils, pushing the hero to the brink of defeat. It took the combined efforts of Superman, Spider-Man, and Access, a multi-dimensional hero, to defeat Venom finally, with Access utilizing a sonic generator to exploit the symbiote's sonic vulnerability. Venom was ultimately vanquished, but not before showing that Superman had no idea how to handle this symbiote. Number 3, Thor plus the Avengers. The God of Thunder has taken on the Man of Steel before. During the JLA Avengers number 2 in 2003, Kal-El and Thor faced each other in a fierce battle. The Kryptonian was on the losing side of things until he managed to lift Mjolnir and even caught it mid-air. Kal-El won that fight by the skin of his teeth, but he was left bruised and battered, and that was more than enough of an opening for Thor's buddies to do what they do best: avenge him. The Avengers' heaviest hitters, Iron Man, Hercules, Wonder Man, The Vision, and She-Hulk dogpiled on Superman and pummeled him until he was completely unconscious. Number 2, Alfred Pennyworth. I don't care what any of you say, Alfred Pennyworth is the greatest superhero of them all. In the alternate universe where the Injustice games and tie-in comics take place, Superman has turned evil and comes to the Batcave to pay his former ally, Bruce, a brutal visit. After breaking Batman over his knee, Superman finds a new opponent when Alfred intervenes. It sounds like a fight that Superman would win in a heartbeat, but with temporary superpowers granted by a pill called 5U93R, which grants heightened strength and endurance, Alfred knocks Superman to the floor with a punishing headbutt before pounding his face, all while screaming about how disappointed he is in Superman and how Superman has hurt his family. Tell him, Alfred. Tell him good. Number 1, Orion. Orion is a new god and the son of Darkseid, and as a hero with a dark ancestry, he is quite the conflicted do-gooder. He has many forms and he has many abilities. He exists beyond the normal multiverse on a higher plane called the Sphere of the Gods. Born on Apocalypse but adopted by the gods of New Genesis, Orion is in a constant war with his inner darkness and with his father, Darkseid. Now Orion is repeatedly praised and stated to be a warrior with skill and ferocity second to none, and there have been more than a few times where he has faced the Man of Steel and brought the guy down quite a few pegs. In one story, Death of the New Gods, Orion comes to Earth believing that Hector Hammond had hidden inside Superman's subconscious. Seeing Superman as a threat to the universe, Orion begins the fight with a brutal sucker punch before completely walloping the Man of Steel out of a space station. He's been able to go toe-to-toe with a sun-dipped Superman when the rest of the JLA couldn't do a single thing. He's been flown into the ground by Superman, who then speed blitzed the guy, and Orion just waited till Superman was finished, smiling the whole time before swatting him into the sky like a bug. He's moved so fast that he snatched up Superman before he or Wonder Woman could even react, and then he chucked the Man of Steel into a river. He's one-shot knocked out Superman with his astro harness, grabbed him, and then teleported away while saying how one day he will finally have a challenge, and that's all without reaching the full limits of his power. The guy is a beast.
First up is Wolverine vs. the Hulk. Talk about making an entrance. The Canadian superhero burst onto the scene on his home turf in issue 181 of the Incredible Hulk comic books. Wolverine was working for the Canadian federal government at the time and ended up having to jump into a fight between Hulk and the Wendigo. This was truly a clash of the titans, and the Wolverine proved to the world that he could hold his own. He ended up taking on both characters before he eventually sided with Hulk, and the pair worked together to take down Wendigo. It's nothing new for Marvel heroes to fight each other when they first meet, but this one hit a little heavier than usual. There was quite a bit of tension between Wolverine and Hulk for a very long time. There's always the feeling that neither one of them actually got over it. Whatever the case though, it was still the perfect way for Wolverine to announce his arrival and put the Hulk on notice. Up next, Wolverine tosses Deadpool. Well, we already know these two have had some wild rides together. The relationship between Wolverine and Deadpool can simply be described as complicated. Although they have fought alongside each other on numerous occasions, they've also had plenty of situations that have turned sour. Back in 2009's Hulk vs. Wolverine, the Canadian government tasked their hero with tracking down the Green Giant. The only problem was that Team X, which included Wolverine's old buddy Deadpool, managed to capture him. Although Deadpool had his usual basket of witty insults prepared, Wolverine got the last laugh when he tossed the foul-mouthed hero into a revived Hulk. To add even more insult to injury, the Green Giant then smashed Deadpool into a wall. It might not have been an electric fight on this occasion, but Wolverine definitely got the last laugh. Next up is Wolverine vs. Captain America. These two have had an up and down relationship over the years, but things really got interesting in the third issue of Avengers vs. X-Men. It's obvious that the two sides had very different opinions on certain topics, and this boiled over into a hard-fought battle over the Phoenix Force. Wolverine had informed the Avengers that Cyclops did not have good intentions for the Phoenix Force and was ready to kickstart the war. Captain America, however, was not buying what Wolverine was selling and began to have doubts about the X-Men. The two heroes eventually came to blows, and Wolverine actually did much better than most people might have assumed. He was really giving Captain America a run for his money until Giant Man stepped in and hammered Wolverine from behind. Wolverine might have lost this one, but it was only because Captain America needed some outside help to win. After that, we have Wolverine vs. Spider-Man. If you want to talk about epic showdowns, then this one is definitely near the top of the list. Wolverine and Spider-Man were both placed in Berlin during the Cold War for two very different reasons. Spider-Man was on assignment as a photographer, but Wolverine was actually trying to help a spy who also happened to be an ex-girlfriend of his. The spy wanted Wolverine to put her out of her misery, as the Germans and the Soviets were both on her tail, but Spider-Man did not want this to happen. He wanted to bring the elusive spy to justice, and this ultimately meant that he would have to fight Wolverine. The two had a spirited tilt, and although Wolverine didn't come out with W on this occasion, his tremendous skills ultimately got him exactly what he wanted. Spider-Man's rage had risen to new levels, and he'd ended up striking the spy with a lethal punch, which of course is what Wolverine set out to do in the first place. Up next is Wolverine vs. North Star. Enemy of the State was a pretty wild time in the life of Wolverine. This story saw the Canadian hero lured to Japan, where he was eliminated by Gorgon, only to be resurrected as a powerful slave of an evil ninja syndicate. He then worked as a soldier for the Hand and Hydra Alliance and attacked pretty much everyone in sight. Enemy of the State includes some memorable battles with Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, and many more. But Wolverine's biggest statement from all of these fights was his battle against his fellow Canadian, North Star. Wolverine came out of this fight as the only surviving hero, but his crazed rampage was finally put to a stop by the rest of the X-Men. Who knows how many more he could have taken down had the X-Men not intercepted him. Our next fight takes us back to Wolverine vs. Deadpool. On this occasion, Wolverine actually managed to take his acquaintance's head off with his razor-sharp claws. This all occurred in the 44th issue of Cable and Deadpool when the foul-mouthed hero went solo to try and save Weasel from Hydra. This unfortunately meant that he was going to cross paths with Wolverine, who had been tasked with taking out the Hydra base's section commander. Of course, that commander happens to be Weasel, and the conflicting jobs ended up resulting in another fight between the two heroes. Unfortunately for Deadpool, Wolverine took a quick swipe at his frenemy's head and managed to clear it right off of his shoulders. While this would have been the end of pretty much anyone, Deadpool's special abilities only called for his head to be stuck back on his neck so he could return to normal. Next on our list is Wolverine vs. Cyclops. This was a spirited tale that included many years of built-up rage. Now, to say things have been rocky between these two heroes over the years would be the ultimate understatement. It's no secret that Wolverine and Cyclops never saw eye to eye on many things, but it rarely ever boiled over into violence. That is until Cyclops decided to send a young mutant to eliminate a group of Hellfire Club goons. This decision sent Wolverine over the edge, as he couldn't understand why Cyclops would send such a young person to commit this terrible crime. The two exchanged verbal jabs before they finally let their fists do the talking and kicked off one of the craziest fights we've ever seen. A Sentinel eventually showed up to put a stop to this rage-filled battle, so there really was no definitive winner. The intense fight did, however, remind everybody that Wolverine meant business. Now we have Demon Wolverine versus the X-Men. The Canadian superhero was dragged into hell on multiple occasions, but his demon-possessed fight against his X-Men buddies was one for the ages. The Red Right Hand summoned Logan to the underworld and Logan goes to hell, only for his body to be completely taken over by a demonic entity. This demon was hell-bent, pun intended, on tracking down the rest of the X-Men and eliminating them with one of their own allies. While the real Wolverine was doing his best to escape from the underworld, his possessed body took on the X-Men in a battle for the ages. Although it wasn't technically Wolverine himself, this is still one of the hero's most memorable fights. The demon made good use of the body while it was in control and showed off the tremendous power that Wolverine is actually capable of. Now, thankfully the X-Men managed to put a stop to their evil friend, but this was one battle that we will never forget. Up next is the Deadpool fight from Wolverine Origins. There's absolutely no shortage of conflicts between these guys who always seem to be brought together by fate. While Deadpool was on a mission to eliminate his old pal Wolverine, turns out there was an unexpected twist that led him to this situation. Deadpool was hilariously using all sorts of cartoon attack methods to eliminate Wolverine, such as dropping a piano on his head, but nothing seemed to work. After many tense battles and verbal tirades, the two heroes eventually got serious and discovered a little more about why they were in this situation. As it turns out, Wolverine was actually the one who hired Deadpool in the first place to eliminate himself. He did this to lure Daken out of hiding. This of course meant that Wolverine was able to use Deadpool to get the last laugh and ensure that he got exactly what he wanted. It also must have stung Deadpool pretty bad that he was unable to complete his task of eliminating Wolverine. And finally we have Wolverine vs. the Grey Hulk. Logan came to blows with his longtime enemy once again for one of the most memorable fights in Marvel's history. In issue 340 of The Incredible Hulk, Wolverine decides to take matters into his own hands while Grey Hulk is on a rampage. He jumps into another battle with the Raging Giant to put an end to the Smash Fest, and both heroes really gave it everything they had. There was plenty of back and forth and lots of destruction, and Wolverine actually managed to push Grey Hulk to the brink. It probably would have been over against almost any other hero, but Hulk's healing abilities allowed him to make a comeback and get the final decision in this fight. Although Wolverine might have lost in the end, he was able to taste a bit of victory against one of his toughest opponents. This also put the Hulk on notice that his enemy was stronger than he might have originally thought.